Everybody else who's, oh great, we're turning recording on. Thanks, Alex. For everyone else who's here, we'll give like 1 or 2 more minutes for your colleagues to get here. Today should be a shorter day. We're gonna finish strong, hopefully get everybody's projects working, and then talk about where you can go from here. But I just want to make sure we give them like 1 or 2 more minutes to get set up. If you have questions in the meantime, I'll be monitoring chat. I will resume sharing my screen and just say again today, if you don't have what we did last workshop working, I will put the link in chat momentarily. Otherwise, all you need for today is Zoom signals as we've been using. And then again, last week's workshop where we set up your network diagram to be reading from a CSV. I hope that some of you had time to make those CSVs cooler, put in your own data, but I also know this is a pretty crazy time in the semester, so you may not have. For the purposes of the workshop, I'm going to continue with the Cinderella example, but please, by all means, if you have a CSV that you'd like to use with your own data, please feel free. So momentarily, I'll put the link in chat in case you need the temporary IDE. Again, everybody, we'll give folks 1 more minute and then we'll get started. So I know there aren't that many people left at this part in the semester. I know you guys have enough of your own work, and I think a lot of folks, if they are going to finish the workshop, are going to do it asynchronously. That's all right. So also tonight, if it's a bad time for you, you're in the middle of midterms and you want to watch the recording later, that is also an option. If you need that for some mental health, go ahead and plan on the recording. We'll be sure to send that out. Okay, it's 6:04 though, so I'm going to go ahead and start for everybody here. If we finish early, I can give you that time back. First things first, just going to talk about where we came from and what we're doing today. So again, week 1, we started with installing Python, learning the command line. Week 2, you all got Sublime working or another IDE. You got your basic network diagram. Week 3, which was last week, hopefully you were able to connect to a CSV file. This again is a branch point where if you want to be doing your own work, I highly encourage you to swap that out with something. If you don't have a lot of time, completely understand. There's no need to make those from scratch. If you have something like a TV show you're interested in, for example, Game of Thrones, if you Google data for Game of Thrones character, maybe network diagram on there as well. You can often find other people who have done network projects around these. You can take their data and start playing around with it, and you don't have to like code from scratch every character in your favorite TV show. But highly recommend you use some of your own data. Even if you just go in there and you put in your family and friends, it can be fun to actually see a project that's really meaningful to you. So this week we are wrapping up strong. And what we're going to be doing is making the diagrams that you already created interactive. So we're going to add one last library here, one more practice point with a library that does a little bit different functionality that I think it's valuable to practice. That's pyviz. So one more time, again, trying pip and installing. But the basic concept here is today we will make your network diagram interactive. It's going to show up as an HTML page, which if you're not familiar, that's what's used to write web pages, and you're going to be able to interact with it, and it's going to look like a fully coded little applet where you can click on your diagram and drag things, and it kind of just shows the power that you have with leveraging these libraries, because the total sum, I know you all have done a lot of homework, but the total sum of like in-class time you all will have spent on the workshop is about 4 hours, which is really, really short. So you should be applauding yourselves that you can do a Python project like this for the first time in only 4 hours. And I want to make sure I leave you having touched several libraries that are important and also several libraries that are a little tricky, might have some nuances to them. So if you get interested in your own projects, you'll have seen these before and you won't get tripped up when some strange things happen. So I am going to close out of the slides. I'm going to pull up my browser and we are going to talk really quick about PyViz, which is the library we're going to be using today. So the deal is, again, like we learned last week, when you want to do something that's going to involve a new library, for example, you had your network diagram from last week. You said, this isn't really what I want to be able to interact with it. You would be Googling Python, how to make network X interactive. If you did, what would come up is PyViz. And again, you would go to Google and you would say, I don't know PyViz, but I want to get to know it. PyViz, you would search Python documentation, and all of these top links here will point you to it. For the sake of time, I have tabs open to some pages that you would navigate to as you were exploring. But it's great to get in this habit of, like, someone mentions a library, you think you might want to use it, Google the documentation, take a look, see what people say about using it, maybe what it can or can't do. That's really great to get in the practice of, and it's not something we're always used to. You know, in programs like PowerPoint or Microsoft Word, there's a lot of inbuilt help, and it's there for Python, but because we're downloading libraries from other places, you know, the best resource for them is also coming from the place we download them, and that's the internet. So this is the home page for PyViz documentation. Again, it has a few quick links on the side and includes a search bar. So as you get deeper into it, you can see that I've searched for some things. But what I'm going to start with is going to the installation piece. I know you all have done this several times now, but it's good to get in the habit just in case there's any strange nuance. What I want you all to do is see that, again, they're recommending we install with pip. I'm going to highlight with my mouse the line that we would use to install it. If you could use pip install PyViz on your computer now and install PyViz, I will pull up the participants window. If you can give me a green check or red X, that would be great. And I see someone saying in chat that the link is not working for you. Are you talking about the binder link? Does it throw up an error? You can let me know. I'll try and keep a little eye on chat, see how that's going for you. I saw one green check. I know it's going to be taking people some time. Somebody got an error when you tried pip install PyViz. Are you all talking about an error for PyViz or for the link? Okay. What link, what error do you get, rather? I can also try using it on my computer and see if I get it to go. No link 404. Okay, hang on. See, when I use it, I get this screen. Which is also a 404. Okay, hang on, team. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. In the meantime, folks, if you can be installing PyViz, I will take a look at the temporary IDE. One moment. If that link does not end up working during the workshop, I'll make sure that it works afterward. If folks who are joined live aren't able to get it working, then another option available to you all is, if you want to bow out and watch the recording, I'll make sure the link works for that. Yeah, sorry guys. Technology, we can never get it all working at the same time. I appreciate your patience. I will double check the link on my end now, but again, if it doesn't work, I'll make sure it's working afterward. In the meantime, if folks are installing PyViz and can give me a check, I don't see that many folks, so I just want to make sure that I'm not zooming ahead without everyone. Okay, more checks. Excellent. All right, hang on a moment while we see if we can get Jupyter Notebook to work one more time. Could be something wrong with Jupyter this evening. Yeah, okay. Sorry, guys, I'm getting the 404. I can try one more link But I'm going to assume that there is something wrong with Jupiter this evening, which is poor timing. And if we can't get it working, then yes, I would recommend joining, watching the link, rather, the recording. Hang on. My computer's crying out, having to do this all at once. One moment, team. I will skip ahead and grab it from here. One more attempt, and then we'll see. Okay, looks like this one is going to load. So for folks in chat, I'm going to put a new link. This is actually the link to the end of today's workshop. Good news, bad news. There won't be surprises for you as you look at the temporary ID, but at least this link is guaranteed to work. So great, hopefully that helps you all be able to follow along today. For everyone else, again, the step we've just finished is installing PyViz. Hopefully that installed successfully for you. If it didn't, we have the temporary IDE in chat. At least one of them is working today, so that's good. And the next step after you've looked at the installation, hopefully, again, there won't be surprises here. Eventually you'll get sick of pip, and every time you'll see it, you'll be like, oh, okay, whatever. Like I could be watching a movie while I install a Python package. The more practice you get with it, the more you learn what needs your system has, and get familiar with errors. So hopefully that worked. The next phase that I would suggest going to when you're in the documentation, we did installation, hopefully it installed, is to check out the tutorial that they have. And in this case, we're going to skip ahead because here we are live in a workshop for time reasons. We're going to sort of do the highlights and the best bits, but looking at the tutorial that any library has can usually give you the nuances of how people use it. For example, right here at the top, it tells you how people commonly import this part of PyViz. And so we can get a sense for if there are certain aliases. This is usually, I've highlighted network, this is usually where an alias goes. So for a moment now, I'm going to pull up side by side our code from last week. Oh, trying to open it in Python's IDE. We do not want that. We want Sublime. That may have happened to you all once or twice by now. Another great thing to just get accustomed to and not have to worry about when it happens. Okay, so this is our Python code from last week. I'm putting it side by side with the tutorial here and just scrolling down to two places that we can see that import pandas as PD and that import network X as NX. We can also see here the import matplotlib as PLT. Again, these pieces on the right are the aliases that people use. And it's a great idea to at least be aware of what the tutorial recommends, because those aliases could be anything. You could put complete gibberish there and it would be perfectly valid for you and your own code. But as you're inevitably copy pasting from examples that other people have put online, or maybe you're running into an error and someone has a solution, you'll be copy pasting something that is more similar to your own code. So in this case, as we look at the tutorial, we're seeing how they import PyViz. They're doing not just PyViz as a whole library, they're doing .network. You all have seen this before in the way that we brought matplotlib.pyplot in. And as the sort of alias or function they're loading, they're putting network. So when we begin to import PyViz, this is how we're going to do it. So what I want you all to do is PyViz is going to take our network X bit. It's the part I've highlighted here. And previously, we built our network, sort of the back end with network X, and then we visualized it with matplotlib. That's what makes the little window appear on your screen with the actual diagram. We're going to be replacing that today with PyViz. Instead of bringing up a window, it's going to bring up an HTML file. So we're going to practice what we learned in one of the previous weeks, which is this matplotlib piece we no longer need, because we're going to be replacing it, but we want to keep it for history reasons for our notes in here. So I want you to highlight that code, and whatever way you've learned on a Mac, it's command / I believe on a Windows, it's control /. You're going to comment that out. If a shortcut doesn't work for you, you can also manually add this hashed sign in front of each line. And again, what that's doing is turning off that piece of code so that it won't run. Now we're going to start our own piece where we're bringing in pyviz. We want to leave ourselves a comment. In this case, I like to put the name of the library. While we're at it, again, I recommend if you're looking at the documentation, I know you all are looking at it my screen right now rather than your own, but I also like to copy that documentation link in for me. So if I go away for a weekend, I don't look at my code for a while, I can always come back to the place I was looking at the documentation, and I could figure out, where did I get these things from? Okay, so the next step we're going to be doing here is writing out exactly what they have there in the tutorial. We want to import the library, so we're going to start that from pyviz.network. And you'll have to be careful. It might want to correct network as network X. They are different. And we're going to import network. And it needs to be capitalized. And then that next line, net equals network. And you'll know that it's starting to work successfully if you see that network line turn blue and be recognized as a formal function. So I'm going to add a couple of lines here just to scroll things up so that you all have space to see what I'm writing. You do not need to add those enter statements. I just want to have room here. So again, at this stage, what we've done is import pyviz. We've brought in a network function exactly as we're seeing in the tutorial. And the next steps, which are listed in the tutorial, but I'm just going to give you, because it's only 2 more lines, and we want to be time efficient, is net dot from nx g. And what this is calling again this network function. And this is the integration with network X, this previous library we've used. Now there is a whole tab in here in the documentation, I think it's lower down, that says how the two are integrated. It'll give you a long example. It'll walk you through getting this from an X function, etc., etc. I'm just going to give you those 2 lines today to save time. So you need this line and then one more, which is net.show. And then this is where we name our HTML file. For right now, we're just going to call it nx.html. And this should be all we need to run pyviz. So I'm going to try building, see if the code runs properly. It's taking time. I don't know if you noticed, for me, my code's been running previously in about 1 second. Here it's taking as much as 3. Nothing has happened on my screen though, and this is actually what I expected. So when we did matplotlib and we did plot.show, the line we've commented out, we got a pop-up window and it was immediately clear that our code was working. In this case, we're not making a pop-up window, we're making an HTML file. So I'm going to give you all a minute, whatever folder you've been running your code in. For me, it's the desktop. So I'm going to minimize so you can see my desktop. Here's my code. There should have been created an HTML file. So I'm just going to move it to the side so that you can see it highlighted. Again, in this line 56, we added show nx.html. And now I have a new nx.html file that I did not create manually. That was created by my code. So I'm going to check in with you all. I'm going to clear the checks and X's. If you can give me a green check if that's working for you, a red X if it's not, that would be great. I know we only have a few people today. So one green check, wonderful. That's good news. I'll see if maybe I can get one more before we move on. But yes, a word of caution to folks here. Do be aware that if little HTML files like this are popping up in your folder, you might think to yourself, I don't remember making that. I should just delete it, and it could be spam. Keep in mind that you may have been creating it with your Python script. And if you do something like accidentally add like a typo here, you might create multiple files. So just be mindful that you have the power with Python to make files, and you may be doing so. I see we have a red X, and I also see a comment in chat. I'm getting a pop-up from an old network diagram. Okay, and another comment in chat, comment the old plot out. Exactly, that's what's happening. You probably have a plot.show line, like this line 49, that you haven't commented back out. If I turn that on and run my code, you'll notice it gives me an error. That is because I haven't uncommented everything. If I run it all, I will also get a pop-up. So just be mindful. If anything happens, like you're generating files you don't expect, or pop-up windows are happening, it's you, it's in your code. Just take a moment and review what might be turned on or off. Okay, so that is fixed for one person. Someone says they're getting an error with the file. If you would share what that error is, that would be helpful, just so that we can see if anyone else is maybe having that same problem.
Okay, I thought that was the error, but yeah, it says that node's CSV list is not defined. I think I might be missing like a piece of code, maybe.
You are probably missing this bit.
No, it's not that, it's down below that, yeah.
Here?
Yeah, I don't think I have that.
Okay, I can copy paste it into chat if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Just be mindful, this is a great learning moment for everyone. When you copy paste from another program, could be a chat, could be an email from a friend, could be a website. Sometimes when you copy paste into Sublime or another IDE, the little quotation marks are not the same. So I'll show you if I pull it up. This is actually, I know this seems trivial. This is actually something that will come up quite a bit. I'm going to pull up Microsoft Word and a blank document just to show you the difference. Here's Microsoft Word. We have random text. And I add quotation marks here. Can you see that these quotation marks, I'm going to zoom in really big, are kind of swirly? They're like decorative, they're curved. They are different than the quotation marks you will see in Sublime. These are very rigid. So just be mindful, anytime you copy paste from a source, double check that you're seeing these rigid vertical quotation marks, because it can be so silly. You can copy paste, and the difference between your code working and not can just be replacing those quotation marks. So great, thank you everyone for sharing your errors. We're going to move forward just a little bit more. So this is the core piece that you need in order to run it. But now we want to actually view that HTML file. So this is another case where everyone might have a different system. We'll have to deal with those growing pains. But I have nx.html on my desktop. I use Chrome to browse. And so when I right click, I have an option to open that file with Chrome. You all might have an option to open it with your preferred browser. Here's a moment of truth. Developers develop in Chrome. There's a lot of different reasons behind why that's happened. We know that Google is basically the internet for most people, but essentially Google developed a lot of tools that are really useful for developers to use as they're working. Because of that, most developers use Google first. They'll check their work to make sure like popular websites like Twitter work in Firefox or Safari, but 99% of the time they're working in Chrome. What that means for you is as you're working and coding, the only way you can guarantee something will work as expected is to check it in Chrome. I tell you that because if you open it in your preferred browser today, maybe you're a Firefox user, don't be discouraged. There's probably ways to tweak the Python library to make it work for you. But if you have Chrome, on your system, even if it's not what you use by default, I recommend you open that file with Chrome. And hopefully what you will see is a version of your diagram that looks like this. And if you click on it and click and drag, you will notice that you now have an interactive version of your diagram. Obviously, right now, it's not really complicated. It's the same version of the diagram, but you can interact with it. It's fun to have the little spring mechanics, but there's not a lot more substance. So we'll unpack it a little bit more, but I want to check in with people at this phase. Were you able to open your HTML file? Were you not? Are you lost? Did you not even have an option when you right-clicked? If you can give me a green check or red X. I know not everyone's able to follow along at the moment, and this is sort of nitpicky, but I just want to make sure, were people able to get their HTML? Were they able to open it? I see one green check. How about other folks? Oh, two green checks. Okay, excellent, wonderful. If you did run into an issue, please speak up in chat. Otherwise, I'm going to plow on with the last little bit of today. So let me move windows around one moment so that we can see everything all at once. So the next piece here is, you'll notice that this is not very impressive as an HTML page. First of all, the title here is none. We'd like to be able to control that, but maybe we don't know how. This is a moment where we would go back to the documentation and say, okay, I mean, if the default behavior has a title like none, but it still puts a title there, like there has to be a way to change it. So even though I don't inherently know what that option is, if I go into the documentation and I search for this library we're working with, so pyviz.network, and I'll show you where that is in the code. Here's our pyviz.network, and here's where we're running the network function. I can immediately see, even if I don't really know the documentation, I haven't read it, right in this first line, you can see that there are options to change the height, the width. There's something about directed or notebook. I don't know what those are at the moment. BG color, I can assume that might be background color. I can see font color, layout, and the very last option is heading here. So what I want you all to try doing is, this is the first time we've used like a really robust option. So when we use networkx.draw, we turned with labels equals true on. We're going to use something similar here. And you're going to say heading equals, and it could be anything you want. In this case, I am going to put Cinderella and rerun the code. So again, in order to do this, you would build, maybe you're using a build shortcut on your computer, and you will need to either reopen or re-find the tab of your HTML and refresh it. So this is another workflow that it can help to get used to. When you're using the matplotlib, every time we run our code, we get a new pop-up. It's the latest and greatest. When you're using an HTML file that's been generated, there's the extra step that you have to refresh the page. So that allowed me to specify a header. If I look in the documentation some more, I can see that there's a height and width. I can add options for that. I can say height is the first input. I can set it equal to, let's say, 500 pics, which is pixels. I can set width equal to 800 pixels. And I can run and build that, go back to my HTML, refresh, and see what happens. So this can be useful to play back and forth. You have very little to lose by trying out options, even if it breaks. Worst case scenario, you can delete one, but looking in the documentation can start to give you a sense of what a function might be able to do. Now, 90% of the time, you're not just like in the weeds, looking through documentation, trying random things. Usually you'd be Googling, how do I change the width of pyviz? Or why does my pyviz say none at the top? And someone will point you to options like this, and you can look them up in the documentation and sort of get a casual answer from people online, and a formal answer here, so that you'll know something like, for example, if height is in pixels or in inches, you'll know if you need to add pix at the end. It'll let you know if there's anything you need to do with heading that's special. You know, do you need single quotes or double quotes? So it can just help you connect the two and get to an answer. The last thing we're going to do today is there is another part in here further down in the documentation. I will look it up in the tutorial for you all. So if you were to scroll down in the tutorial, you would get to a point where it talks about using a UI to dynamically tweak settings. This is sort of a shortcut inbuilt to PyVis that's common of a lot of libraries. And what you can do is PyVis, as we see in this little animated GIF here, will give you sliders to change the attributes of your diagram and let you save and copy paste those settings into your code. The reason why someone might do this is maybe you all remember when Java was really popular, we used to have a bunch of applets on the internet. There might be sliders you could move back and forth. It's sort of a UI you could interact with. Whoever made PyVis doesn't want you to sit reading documentation for days and days and days just to say change the color of your network diagram. So what they did is they inbuilt little UIs where you can turn on sliders, move things around, and they will give you the code for the formatting. So the way to do that is we're going to use something called show buttons that's going to allow us to turn several buttons on. If we look in the documentation at show buttons, and again, this is over time, you'll see that there are 3 different options. There's options for nodes, there's options for edges, and there's options for physics. What that means for us, again, going back to the tutorial, is that we're going to type something like this. So let's start by doing the options for our nodes. And I'm going to come here and I'm just going to duplicate what I've seen there, but I'm going to put it at this line down here. So I want to put it in between the time that I've generated my diagram as an HTML and I've connected it to network X. So I'm going to do net.showButtons, filter, and again, I am copying what I'm seeing there in the example, except instead of putting physics, I'm going to put edges and I'm going to put nodes, which again, I know that's possible from looking in the documentation and seeing that there are 3 options: nodes, edges, and physics. I'm copying what I'm seeing in the tutorial. This time, if I build and run my code, I refresh my page, I'm gonna have to make the window bigger so that you all can see it. Just let me know if you need me to go back to the code. There is now a selection of sliders over here on the side where I can change things like the width of the border, I can change colors, I can make them bigger, I can make it smaller, I can change font. There's tons and tons of options here. You may have to scroll back and forth in order to sort of see, oh, what is my diagram looking like? How would I change things? I will say with this applet, if your computer is working really hard, sometimes it doesn't load the full color wheel right away. I recommend closing other programs. For example, I'm running Zoom with you all while I'm also running Sublime and the browser with several things. So just be mindful if the whole wheel isn't loading for you, maybe close some programs on your computer. But here you can select colors. This is the sort of thing where on your own time, if you want to play around with it, I recommend fiddling with various things. But today we're just going to talk about how you would use this. So in this case, I am going to change the border color to something, change the background just to something absurd and garish. So I've made my diagram ugly, but let's pretend that I've tweaked it just the way I want it to look. If I come down to the bottom, there is an option to generate options. Now, again, the way I might know this is possible is here in the tutorial, it walks me through all of the steps. It shows me how to turn on buttons, how to fiddle with sliders. And then in this GIF, it shows you how to go to the bottom, how to scroll, how to click generate options and paste it into code. But because this is so tiny and we're all looking at my screen within a screen, I'm going to show you all what this video is doing more clearly, hopefully zoomed in on my own screen. So again, I've selected options. I really like them. I hit generate options and you'll see that it's giving me a little variable. It's a variable options equals to, and it has all of this information in it in a very particular format. This is exactly what I was talking about, where like the developer of PyViz didn't want you to have to sit there and figure out this structure and, oh, how do I add something for nodes or edges? They've given you a shortcut. You just need to know how to implement it. So the way to do it is you'll copy what's here, and I can't quite see because of the zoom controls, so apologies, I have to move this in order to see the copy screen. You'll copy everything that's here, and then again, it's shown in the tutorial how to do this. I'm just going to shortcut show you how to do it here. You will start a new line, net.set options. And what you want to put inside it is the thing you've copy pasted. The weird nuance that this library asks you to do, and again, it's in the tutorial, is it asks you to enclose your copy pasted bit with 3 quotation marks. So you're going to type 3 quotation marks, you're going to paste your code, and you're going to close it with 3 quotation marks. The way you'll know you've done that correctly is you'll notice as I'm typing those quotation marks, everything beneath my cursor is yellow. As I complete them and I put the right number in, the syntax is recognized. I get everything's white or blue properly again. Now I have theoretically set these options that I was fiddling with. I want to turn off the buttons. So I comment out that line and I rerun the code, refresh my screen, and now it should be garish and ugly, or in your case, hopefully with lovely settings after you've had a chance to tweak them, and those buttons have disappeared. So the important thing to recognize here is this is sort of all the possible components when using a library. There's a way to import it, maybe a convention that the library has about what alias to use. There's settings that you may not know are possible, such as setting the heading. And then sometimes there are inbuilt features, such as buttons or sliders, that allow you to prefix a set of options. So this is a path that you might go down with several libraries. You've seen it once. It's not something that you'll need to remember and memorize. As I said, usually in a tutorial like this, there's a step-by-step procedure, a GIF or a video like this that will show you how to go through the steps. If not, you can also Google what you're trying to do, and hopefully someone who's used the library will have put up how to do that. So I just want to check in with folks. Can you give me a green check if you were able to get settings to work? Great, I see 1 check, 2 checks. I know that's what we have tonight. Excellent, thank you. Then I am going to close out with just a little bit of talking about next steps. We will be sharing the slides from today and the recording, but I want to recap everything you all learned. And so that's coming back around to where we started on week 1 versus where we got to this week. This is what to remember. Let's say that you all are exhausted. I know many of us are. Maybe you don't touch Python again until after the summer. This is the slide of concepts that we learned that you would come back around to. Everything on here is a link to the topic we discussed in W3 Schools. It has more information, it has tutorials, it has interactive bits where you can try the code. So all of the pieces we went through, you all learned command line, how to install Python, pip, and how to use it to install packages. You probably learned Sublime as your IDE. If not, you have an alternative. For the libraries, the most popular will be pandas and matplotlib. Those will come up in like half of the projects that you're likely to do in Python. Network X is one of the more complicated ones. So we explored that as just a challenge to see like, okay, how do we use a more obscure library? And with PyViz, the nuance there is that it generates HTML files. If you get really interested in Python and making Python projects, one of the best ways to share it is as HTML files. You might get interested in web design and writing HTML. W3 Schools, again, the website all of these links are to, has support for learning HTML. And the good news is because you learned Sublime, which is a multi-language IDE, you can write HTML in Sublime. So the same way that we have Python files open in Sublime, you can have your Python code in one tab, your HTML in another, and really get into your projects if that's something you're interested in. But the main part to remember from what we went over in the workshops are the few pieces you definitely need in order to code. That's printing things indiscriminately when you want to figure out more about what's happening. We use that from everything from printing what version of Python was running to printing the type of different data structures and figuring out what was going on. On that note, type is one of the functions you'll need most, especially if you start to download someone else's data or someone else's library. You can fearlessly run type on anything and figure out, what am I looking at? Am I looking at a function? Am I looking at a data structure, something clever like a pandas data frame? Or am I looking at something inbuilt like tuples, which is what we learned with doing the edge list? Then remembering to leave yourself comments, can't stress that enough. 90% of your time is spent looking things up and figuring out what you're doing. The more comments you leave for yourself, the more you'll have an idea of where you were. And then you learned how to import libraries, save variables. And the last thing I'll say is you learned about for loops. Now I'll pull up the for loop here at the bottom just to remind you all where that was. So the for loop is when we went through the edges CSV. We skimmed over it pretty quickly, but the point here being, as long as you're aware that there are structures in Python to iterate through things, think of it as like if you were asking someone to do the task manually, you would say like, go through every row in the Excel file and start building my network diagram, or read every row and then make for me this tuple list. As long as you're aware that structures like for loops exist, when you see them in other people's code, you can recognize them because of this indented line. So there are for loops. I have a link to for loops should you forget about them or want to learn more about them. But there are also other types of structures. There are if loops and while loops. There are conditionals. You don't need to know what they are. You just need to know that things like that exist in Python. You may come across them in your projects as you're working, and fearlessly look it up in W3 Schools. For example, if loops, if you were to look at these, it's going to give you descriptions about how to make if statements, which basically asks the computer a question. For example, if we had a massive edge list of Disney characters and we wanted to pull out only the Disney princesses, we could use an if loop to iterate through every line and ask the question, is this character a Disney princess? If it is, add it to the list. Otherwise, ignore it. This is the type of structure you would use to do that. And that's the power of Python coding, is these are sort of human analysis activities that you can get Python to do for you. So again, I'll get off my soapbox on that, but that was just iterating that these are the things you all learned. These are resources for them. Again, especially if you set this aside over the summer and don't pick it up again until later. There is no homework for today because this is our last workshop, but if you got stuck or ran into issues, the things that we did today were installing PyViz and making the diagram interactive. We have the binder link working for that. I'll get the previous one working in case anyone wants to start at week 3, but you're welcome to use this binder link just to look at where we ended the workshop. That will remain active for quite some time as well. So if you go away for the summer and want to check back in on what we did, maybe your computer dies, you don't even have Python and Sublime anymore, you could use that to check on where we were. The last thing I'll say is, in this, how can you get help? I have links to W3 Schools, which is the one I keep talking about, for anything you want to learn: coding, Python, CSS, JavaScript, HTML, any language that comes up. See if W3 Schools has it first. It truly is the industry standard. If you're looking for tutorials for more complicated projects, I recommend Real Python. If you have errors on your own, maybe nobody's around, you don't have colleagues who are coding Python, check Stack Overflow. And then the last thing is, although this is the busy season, so I don't have availability right now in April, you are also welcome to email me or book an appointment. I will say the appointment system is automatic. You are welcome to book an appointment, decide you don't need it, cancel it, and I will never know. I only know if you show up to my office. I would love to hear about Python projects as you're working on them. But otherwise, thanks everyone for hanging in there. I know this was a heck of a workshop. It's because you all did a lot of work. There's a reason why Python is usually taught in a semester, and I appreciate everyone hanging in there for what was 4 weeks of learning Python through a fire hose. So I will stay on, answer any questions folks might have, but otherwise, please enjoy the rest of your evening. We will share the links to these slides as well as the recordings when we have them. And I will stick around in the Teams channel for a little while in case anybody has wrap-up questions. Yeah, thank you all. There's a lot to learn.
Thank you so much, Kate. And then the recording is going to be on our YouTube channel probably sometime like this week. If anyone wants to rewatch.
Rewatch or start watching because their binder didn't work for their Python. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I'll stop recording.